Natalie Wood's life and death sit at the uneasy crossroads of Hollywood glamour and unspoken pain. To the world, she was the embodiment of cinematic beauty and emotional vulnerability, a star whose presence felt timeless and deeply human. Yet behind the glowing screen image lived a woman, shaped by fear, control, and wounds that never truly healed. Her death on a cold November night in 1981 was not merely a tragic accident lost at sea, but the final chapter of a life spent balancing brilliance with terror. As the years passed, unanswered questions only deepened the mystery, forcing the public to reconsider everything they thought they knew. To understand why her final moments remained so troubling, we must look beyond the headlines and return to the beginning, to a childhood forged under pressure, a career built on sacrifice, and a woman who carried silent scars into every role, every relationship, and ultimately into the darkness of the Catalina waters. A childhood claimed by ambition. Natalie Wood's childhood was never truly her own. Born into a struggling immigrant family, she grew up under the unrelenting ambition of a mother who believed fame was destiny rather than choice. From the moment Natalie could walk, her life revolved around auditions, studios, and adult expectations. While other children played freely, Natalie learned discipline, obedience, and emotional restraint. Mistakes were not tolerated, tears were discouraged, and exhaustion was treated as weakness. Her father, gentle but fragile, offered little protection against the force driving her forward. Love in her household was conditional, tied closely to success. This environment taught Natalie early on that approval came only through performance. She learned to smile on command, to suppress fear, and to please authority figures at any cost. These lessons shaped her into a consummate professional, but they also planted the seeds of lifelong anxiety and self-doubt. By the time the world saw a gifted child actress, Natalie had already learned that survival meant silence and perfection. The trauma that created a lifelong fear, one defining moment from Natalie's childhood, would follow her forever. During the filming of a scene involving water, a stunt went wrong and she was thrown into a rushing stream. Terrified and unable to escape, she nearly drowned while cameras continued rolling. No one intervened quickly enough, and her mother reportedly encouraged the director to keep filming. That experience transformed water into a symbol of terror. From then on, Natalie avoided pools, feared boats at night, and carried a deep, almost paralyzing anxiety around open water. This was not a mild phobia, but a visceral, deeply rooted trauma. Friends and family later described how intensely she feared drowning. This detail would become central decades later when her body was found floating in the ocean. The contradiction between her lifelong terror and the official explanation of her death would haunt investigators and the public alike. What began as a childhood accident quietly became one of the most unsettling threads in her story. From child star to Hollywood icon, Natalie Wood's rise to fame was swift and dazzling. Her performance in Miracle on 34th Street turned her into America's sweetheart, a symbol of innocence and hope. Studios quickly realized her value, placing her in a steady stream of films and television appearances. Audiences watched her grow up on screen, assuming her life mirrored the warmth she portrayed. In reality, fame intensified the pressure. Natalie was expected to mature gracefully, remain likable, and never rebel. As she transitioned into teenage roles, she faced a dangerous industry that blurred boundaries and normalized exploitation. Directors and powerful men recognized her vulnerability, often mistaking obedience for consent. While her talent flourished, her emotional world grew increasingly fractured. Success brought accolades, but it also reinforced the belief that her worth depended entirely on performance. By the time she reached adulthood, Natalie was famous, admired, and deeply alone, carrying childhood trauma into an industry that offered no protection. exploitation, and the cost of silence. The most devastating wounds Natalie carried were invisible. As a teenager, she became entangled in relationships that crossed ethical and emotional lines. According to later accounts, she was sexually assaulted by a powerful Hollywood figure, an experience that shattered her sense of safety and trust. Bound by fear, career pressure, and her mother's insistence on silence, Natalie never publicly confronted her attacker. The industry closed ranks, protecting its own. This trauma profoundly shaped her relationships with men, leaving her torn between longing for protection and fearing control. The silence surrounding the assault became another burden she carried alone. It influenced her choices, her self-esteem, and her emotional volatility. Hollywood celebrated her beauty and talent, yet ignored the damage inflicted behind closed doors. Natalie learned that speaking the truth could cost everything, while silence allowed her career to survive. That lesson would echo throughout her life, shaping how she endured pain and how others failed to hear her. Audrey, imitating pain. As Natalie matured, her performances grew deeper and more emotionally raw. Films like Rebel Without a Cause, Splendor in the Grass, and West Side Story showcased a woman capable of expressing vulnerability with haunting authenticity. Audiences sensed that her pain was real, even if they didn't understand its source. Directors praised her ability to access intense emotion, unaware that she was often reliving personal trauma. These roles solidified her reputation as a serious actress, earning critical acclaim and award nominations. Yet, each performance took a toll. Acting became both a release and a reopening of wounds she never fully healed. While she achieved artistic triumph, her personal life unraveled in parallel. Natalie's greatest strength on screen, her emotional honesty, mirrored her greatest vulnerability off-screen. She was giving the world pieces of herself while quietly breaking apart. Love, marriage, and repeated fractures. Natalie's romantic life reflected her inner turmoil. Her first marriage to Robert Wagner appeared glamorous, but was marked by jealousy, insecurity, and emotional imbalance. Though deeply attached to him, Natalie struggled with fear of abandonment and guilt over her own success. Their divorce left her shaken but searching for identity. Subsequent relationships were intense, brief, and often destructive. She loved passionately, hoping to find stability, but repeatedly encountered betrayal or emotional distance. Marriage to Richard Gregson offered temporary peace, especially with the birth of her daughter, but infidelity shattered that sense of safety. Each failed relationship reinforced her belief that love was fragile and conditional. Natalie's longing for security clashed constantly with her fear of being controlled. This emotional contradiction pulled her back toward familiar patterns, including a return to Wagner, a decision that would later raise haunting questions. The second marriage and rising tension. When Natalie remarried Robert Wagner, many saw it as a romantic reunion. To Natalie, it may have felt like a return to something known, even if imperfect. With 2 children and a quieter lifestyle, she tried to build stability. Yet, beneath the surface, tension simmered. Wagner's jealousy reportedly intensified, particularly regarding Natalie's work and male colleagues. Arguments became frequent, fueled by insecurity and alcohol. Friends and family later recalled Natalie expressing exhaustion and hinting she might leave again. The second marriage lacked the illusion of youthful fantasy, and instead carried unresolved resentments. Natalie appeared increasingly anxious, caught between duty to her family and a growing sense of entrapment. This emotional climate formed the backdrop for the weekend that would end her life, making the events aboard the yacht impossible to view in isolation. The night at Catalina. The weekend on the yacht was meant to be an escape, but it quickly turned volatile. Alcohol flowed freely, tensions escalated and jealousy surfaced. Witnesses later described arguments and a hostile atmosphere. Natalie appeared distressed, while Wagner grew increasingly angry. At some point during the night, Natalie disappeared. Hours passed before authorities were contacted, a delay that raised immediate suspicion. The explanation that she left alone in a dinghy contradicted everything known about her fear of water. When her body was found, the scene told a troubling story. She wore clothing unsuitable for such an outing, and the dinghy appeared strangely undisturbed. Nearby, witnesses reported hearing screams for help, details dismissed at the time. What should have prompted urgent investigation was instead labelled a tragic accident, allowing questions to sink beneath the surface. Evidence, reopened questions, and lasting doubt. Decades later, renewed investigation revealed inconsistencies too significant to ignore. Bruises on Natalie's body suggested injury sustained before entering the water. Broken fingernails hinted at a struggle. Witness testimonies contradicted official accounts, and the captain eventually admitted to lying under pressure. The case was reopened, and Robert Wagner was named a person of interest. Yet no charges were filed, leaving the truth suspended between suspicion and silence. Natalie's sister, Lana, became the most persistent voice demanding justice, insisting her sister would never have entered the water voluntarily. The revised cause of death acknowledged drowning alongside undetermined factors, an admission that something was wrong. Natalie Wood's legacy now exists in two intertwined forms: luminous film career and a death that remains unresolved. Her story stands as a reminder of how power, fear, and silence can distort truth.